Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Dr. Mary Perkinson and I am Assistant Professor here at UNO of Violin and String Education. So today I'm going to go over Mozart 35, Movement 1 with you. And let me give you an idea of the layout of the video. So I'll start with talking about the excerpt in general terms and some suggestions and tips for you for how to approach the excerpt. And then I'm going to go into specific ideas and practice techniques for you through the whole entire excerpt. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and play the excerpt for you at a medium tempo. So there are plenty of recordings out there. If you'd like to play at the performance tempo, you can go ahead and play along with those YouTube recordings. But my goal today is to give you a nice solid medium tempo. Maybe it is your goal tempo to practice with as you're preparing to increase the tempo. So the first thing I would strongly encourage you to do is to listen to the excerpt in context online. So listen to the excerpt with an orchestra and think about how your part, the first violin part, fits into the overall structure. So at the very beginning, the opening, the whole entire orchestra is in unison. Then we're followed by a question and answer in the violins from measure 6 to 12. And then in measure 15, the winds start doing their own thing and the strings start doing their own thing. So it's important to kind of understand how your part fits into the structure of the entire excerpt so it can better help you with your range of dynamics. So the next thing, as you're listening to it and figuring out how your part fits into the structure, is to think about what feeling do I want to communicate when I'm playing this excerpt. So you're going to think about that, and then really the best way to communicate your feelings and emotions freely through the music is through solid technique. So throughout this video, I'm really going to be talking about really solid rhythm, clean intonation. Remember, we're in the key of D major, so it's important that your instrument is really well in tune. And you can start with a few scales and arpeggios in D major to get you warmed up. And then third, I'm going to talk about the importance of dynamic contrast. So in your excerpt, you have forte, piano, and forte, piano. As we all know, there's a lot more ebb and flow within these dynamic ranges. So it's really important that your highs are really high and that your lows are really low, so you have that stark dynamic contrast throughout. And then just a little info about the tempo. So the suggested performance tempo is half note to 65 to 75. So, you know, even some of the greatest violinists in the world have trouble executing this excerpt cleanly and clearly at that tempo. So taking it under is perfectly acceptable. It's really important that you feel confident about your technique, even if the top tempo is 55 to a half note or 50. So when you kind of determine what your goal end tempo is, say it's 55 to a half note, I would suggest you start at half that tempo with 55 to a quarter and then work your way up. One last thing to note before I start going into a detailed overview of the excerpt is I've given you two sets of fingerings. So there's a top fingering and a bottom fingering, set 1 and set 2. So if you're more comfortable staying in first position as much as possible, you're going to want to do set 1. If you're comfortable with more shifts, that will help with staying on the same string more of the time, then you feel free to use set 2. All right, so with that, let's go on to some specific tips for the excerpt. So at the very beginning, it's really important that this D is in tune. So feel free to kind of go ahead and do a little check right before you go to make sure it's in tune. If it's not in tune, just simply go to one of the notes, okay? Don't hang out on both of the notes or just quickly adjust your finger. So we have... So right here, make sure that measure 1 to 2, it's connected. So connect, and then from the G string to the E string, make sure you clear the A and the D in the process. Also, we don't want, right? So we're just gonna put in a decrescendo there so we don't accent that top C. During the rest, use that time to travel to the middle part of the bow. Okay, then we have a rest where you're just gonna stay in the middle. Right here, it's not off the strings, so you don't want, we just want a really flexible bow hand that allows it to sound really light and articulate. So retake back to the middle of the bow. Right here, if you stay in first position, simply roll your bow over during the rest. Make sure it's not too loud there because we're going over to the E because we are still in piano. Or you can go to the A. Again, you can look at the fingerings and do what's best for you. So then the next entrance, again, is the same as the very opening. You're going to want to make sure you count the rest. So 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Middle. Now we come to all these 16ths. So all of a sudden we're putting a bunch of notes under slurs. So this is a new articulation for us. So what you want to do is really make sure that these notes are solid underneath the slur. So I would suggest starting out with separate bows. Even slower than that. And then you're going to do 2 to a bow. And then 4. And then when you feel ready, you're going to do 8. So the whole time while you're practicing getting all 8 notes under the slur, you want to keep in mind that for this first measure, you're going to remain in the lower half, because the following measure, measure 20, you're going to want to start that in the lower half since you have 16 notes in one slur, and we got to start that in the lower half so we can divide our bow equally and get all those notes in. So we'll have lower half, then we divide into quarters. Here you're going to stay near the upper half. So we're at the tip to start this next 16 long note slur. Then be really generous with this first note so you can travel to the middle. So I promised I would talk a little bit about rhythm. This next section is really important for rhythm. So what you can do to help you is to subdivide into 16th notes. So the whole time you're going to be walking gradually up to 4th position. Of course, you can do in 3rd position as well, but 4th is a little bit more comfortable. One other thing to note in this passage is we have a 16th note rest. So all you need to do during the rest is simply stop the bow. Stop. 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 So just making sure we have that articulation in there with that 16th note rest. Okay, so let's keep going to measure 28. welcome to play it as a triple stop. Or if you're more comfortable, just the top 2 notes. Or if you're not comfortable with either a triple stop or a double stop, go ahead and just play the top note. This is another spot with tricky rhythm. So you have the triplet, hamburger, or marmalade. So practice this again with 16ths. So we have and so forth. This next part of A, you're going to want to travel during this little walking back to first position to the lower half so we can really dig in with that forte piano and measure 35. Okay, and then we have similar things happening that we had at the beginning. Let's see, so when you're starting this passage again, the pickup to measure 40, make sure you're in the middle, and then we have a subito forte, so right in the middle of the bow. Again, rhythm. It's perfectly fine to practice all of this with separate bows just so you really get the rhythm ingrained in your left and right hands. So here we have forte and then piano. So travel to the lower half for this articulation coming up at 48. Save your bow. Save your bow. Save your bow. Save your bow. And then here again, be a little more generous on the first 16th if you need to, so you're in the middle of the bow. Forte. So again, you can feel free to just play the top note or all 3 notes or just the top 2 notes. But if it's out of tune, get off the bottom 2 notes quicker. So just nice flexible left hand. Again, we don't want to accent that top note on the E string. Okay. Still forte. Okay, so those are some tips and tricks to help you through the individual technical challenges throughout this whole excerpt. And now I'm going to run through the excerpt for you at a very medium tempo. So my half note is going to be right about 50. 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I hope that this video helps you in your preparation. The most important points I'm going to leave you with is always preparing and thinking ahead where your bow needs to be to get the most successful articulation and sound. So thank you so much, everyone, and best of luck with the audition.